Afro Tales podcast is a part of the Connected Podcast Network.
Ahoy, my friends. Welcome aboard the Afro Tales podcast. I'm your storyteller, Aman Mazinga. Join me as we explore the tales that grew from the people of Indigenous and African descent in the Americas and the Caribbean.
After, come and see me, chef, who will impart upon you a recipe for the story you have just heard.
So with no further ado, let us set sail on this new age of exploration. Mirama's Christmas Test. It was Christmas Eve, and there was a little frost in the air, but it was frosty enough to make people move along briskly as they stirred about Jason in the land of sunshine and flowers, of mockingbirds and alligators, getting together Christmas things for the little ones and for the big ones also. For it is very true, as the poet has said, we are but children of a larger growth. Some of the large ones are bigger children than the small ones. This is just what Mirama Young thought as she sat near Alexander Simpson in the neat parlor of her own home in the upper part of Jason and watched the big logs in the fireplace blaze and hiss. Mirama Young was angry. These two young people were up-to-date African Americans with positive views on most subjects and with good-sized tempers with which to back them up. They both taught school. Mr. Simpson taught for a living but had no sort of love for the work. It seemed to him more dignified to teach school than to follow the trade of a carpenter, the mastery of which he had acquired in his youth and for which he had real aptitude. His supreme ambition was to be a lawyer with political influence and all that. He even dreamed that someday he might be commissioned by the president as minister resident on Consul General near the Court of Fairway. A sort of snap much sought after by ambitious men of his race. Mirama taught school because she liked it and because she was intensely devoted to her race and its best interests. She had a good home and had graduated from a famous seminary at the head of her class. Her father was a builder and contractor, one of the old-timers who hired his time before the war and had been hiring the time of other people ever since. He was a practical old gentleman and thought there was nothing too good for Mirama, his only child. Mirama was engaged to be married to Alexander Simpson. They had reached an agreement on that point, but there were others necessary to fulfillment of their mutual pledges, upon which they were still as far apart as the North and the South. They were argumentative and dogmatic, were Mirama and Alexander, in their discussions. There was nothing of the spoiled child about Mirama, but for so small a woman, she had enough will force for 3 women. When she put her small foot down, Alexander Simpson could not move her to take it up, although he weighed almost twice as much as she did. This was very painful to Mr. Alexander Simpson, who was entirely devoted to Mirama and twice as sentimental as she, and not half as studious in burning the midnight oil. Indeed, Mr. Alexander Simpson did not possess a literary head, although he thought that he did. Mirama had come out of school at the head of her class. Alexander had come out at the foot of his. And during the year that she had taught under him in the city school, she had upheld the discipline and the dignity of the work at that school. Mr. Alexander Simpson was a fine mathematician and somewhat of an architect. He had learned the carpenter's trade in his youth, and his father hoped that with a college education, he would become a master carpenter and builder. His father died just before Alexander finished his college course, and as he had a great many irons in the fire at the time of his death, there wasn't much left for Alexander and his mother when all the creditors were satisfied. Now, if Alexander had been a wise young man, he would have taken up his father's business where his father left off. And if he had done so, he could have saved much of his father's business and property. But Alexander Simpson was not going to bother with the carpenting business, not if Alexander knew himself. He did not think it proper sort of business for a young man with a college education. Any sort of common man could be a carpenter, he thought. But any sort of common man could not be a lawyer. And just here it was that Mirama Young and Alexander Simpson differed. And so radically that Mirama had put her little foot down, and Mr. Alexander could not budge it. They had been fighting it over for the 100th time this Christmas Eve, and had reached a point where silence had fallen upon them like a wet blanket. Mirama was immovable. Alexander was stubborn. I have reached the conclusion that we had better break off our engagement, Mr. Simpson, said Mirama gloomily, staring into the fire. But you can't back out now, Mirama. You have gone too far for that. Oh, yes, I can, snapped Mirama. It is never too late to back out when you find that you have made a mistake. But have you made a mistake? Certainly. That is the reason I think it best to break the engagement. What is the mistake? Asked Alexander meekly. What is it? Why, you are as stubborn as I am, and that I give away to you as much as you do to me. Now, Mirama, be reasonable. You know that you are as stubborn as I am, and that I give away to you as much as you do to me. That is just it, exclaimed Mirama. Neither of us ever give away. One of us must give away. You don't expect me to do you? Alexander did not know how to answer this question, so he evaded it by asking another. You don't love me a bit, do you? You know I do, Mirama said reproachfully. But you are so stubborn. Now, what am I most stubborn in? Asked Alexander soothingly. Everything, Mirama said with a sweep of her arm. Everything. You would provoke a saint. Taking a long pause, she said, Now, take this law scheme of yours. Don't, said Alexander. We can't agree on that. If we can't agree on it, we shall not be able to agree on anything. And we had better not get married. I want to marry you. So there. Mirama had put her little foot down. Alexander argued and coaxed, but he made no headway. He was in despair. Things had never reached this stage before, and a compromise of some sort must be reached. What do you want me to do? Asked the strong man, desperately. What do I want you to do? Asked Mirama indignantly. I have told you 100 times. I want you to give up the idea of reading law. I want you to stop teaching school. I want you to go with my father in the carpenter business. You will never succeed in the law, and you don't like school teaching, and you know all about carpenting. My father wants you to help him. He's getting old and can't attend to all his business. And I'm not going to marry you unless you do what I want you to do in this matter. Alexander had studied the question from 1,000 points of view, and he had reached the conclusion that law was the best business in life he wanted to follow, and that carpenting business was not up to his idea of dignity. What did he get a college education for just to be a carpenter? Not much. You needn't say another word, said Mirama. I will not budge an inch. The business that was good enough for your father and that is good enough for mine is good enough for you. You couldn't make enough money as a lawyer to support me, and you know it. Oh, I don't think I know anything of the sort, exclaimed Alexander. Perhaps you don't, Mirama said dryly. But I do, and I'm not going to try the experiment. We don't need to argue the question anymore. Mr. Alexander Simpson did not argue the question anymore. He put on his thinking cap and kept it on in dead silence for 10 minutes. Then a big spasm of pain passed over his face, and Mr. Alexander Simpson, for the first time in their courtship, surrendered. I have been trying to get you to fix the marriage day for a year now. If I do what you want, will you fix the date? Certainly, said Mirama. I will fix the date anytime you say, after you write the resignation to the school board. That is your Christmas test, said Mirama Young. Alexander took his fountain pen and, securing a sheet of paper, wrote his resignation to the school board to take effect at the end of the holidays, and handed it to Mirama. She read it through carefully and said, We'll fix the date of the wedding. Tomorrow at 3:00, said Alexander. Oh, that is a Christmas test, exclaimed Mirama. Yes, Mirama's Christmas test, said Alexander Simpson. The end. Story number 2. Christmas Eve story. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Maggie Devins, and she had a brother named Johnny, just 1 year older than she. Here they are. Now, if they could, they would get up and make you a bow. But dear me, we get all fastened down in pictures that we have to keep as quiet as mice, or we tear the paper all to pieces. I'm going to tell you something about this little boy and girl, and perhaps some little reader will remember it. You see how very clean and neat both of them look? Well, if you had seen them when Grandma Devins first found them, you never would have thought they would be made to look as nice as this. Now, here's their story. Last Christmas Eve, while Grandma Devins was sitting by her bright fire, there was a loud knock at the door. And upon opening it, she found a policeman who had in his arms 2 children who were nearly dead. I come, Mum, he said, to ask you if you would let these poor little young ones stay with you here tonight in your kitchen? Their mother has just died from the fever. She lived in the old hovel around in Acorn Alley. I am afraid to leave the young ones there tonight, for they're half starved and half frozen to death now. God pity the poor, for it's hard upon them such weather as this. Meanwhile, Grandma Devins had pulled her big sofa up to the fire and was standing looking down upon the dirty and pinched little faces before her. She didn't say anything, but she kept looking at the children and wiping her eyes and blowing her nose. All at once she turned around as if she had been shot. She flew to the pantry and brought out some milk, which she put on the fire to boil. And very soon she had 2 steaming cups of hot milk with nice biscuit broken into it. And with this, she fed the poor little creatures until a little color came into their faces. And she knew that she had given them enough for that time. The policeman said he would call for the children in the morning and take them to the almshouse. The fact is, the policeman was a kind-hearted man, and he secretly hoped that he could get someone to take the children and be kind to them. As soon as Maggie and Johnny had their nice warm milk, they began to talk. Johnny asked Grandma Devins if she had anyone to give her Christmas presents, and Grandma said, "No." But Maggie spoke up and said her mama told her before she died that God always gave Christmas presents to those who had no one to give them any. And throwing her arms around Grandma's neck, she said, God will not forgive you, dear lady, for you've been so good to us." Like a flash of light, it passed through Grandma Devins' mind that God had sent her these children as her Christmas gift. So she said at once, "Children, I made a mistake. I have had a Christmas present." "There," said Maggie. "I knew you would get one. I knew it." When the policeman came in the morning, his heart was overjoyed to see the young ones, as he called them, nicely washed and sitting by the fire, bundled up in some of Grandma Devins' dresses. She had burnt every stitch of the dirty rags which they had on the night before, so that accounted for them being muffled up so. "You can go right away, policeman. These children are my Christmas gift. And please God, I'll be mother and father to both of the poor little orphans." A year has passed since then, and she says that Johnny and Maggie are the best Christmas gifts that any old woman ever had. She has taught Maggie to darn and sew neatly, and one of these days she will be able to earn money as a seamstress. Have you noticed her little needle case hanging against the wall? Do you see the basket of apples on one side? Johnny was paring them when Maggie asked him to show her about her arithmetic, for Johnny goes to school, but Maggie stays at home and helps Grandma. Now, soon as Grandma comes back, she's going to make them some nice pies for Christmas. Johnny will finish paring the apples, while Maggie is stoning the raisins. Oh, what a happy time they will have tomorrow. For I will whisper in your ear, little reader, that Grandma Devins is going to bring home something else with her other than raisins. The same kind-hearted policeman who I told you about in the beginning has made Johnny a beautiful sled and painted the name Hero on it. Grandma has bought for Maggie the nicest little hood and cloak that ever you saw. Is that not nice? I guess if they knew what they were going to get, they wouldn't sit so quietly as we see them. They'd jump up and dance about the floor, even if they tore the paper all to pieces. Oh, let every little girl and boy thank our Heavenly Father for the blessed gift of His dear Son on the first Christmas Day, 1880 years ago. The end. Wow. So I love this book, and it has some great stories in it. The book is a treasury of African-American Christmas stories. This is your Christmas special / episode this week. All right. The book is compiled by Bettye Collier-Thomas. The first story, Mirama's Christmas Test, was from Timothy Thomas Fortune. And the second story, Christmas Eve story, was by Fanny Jackson Copen. Both of these stories were written either right around or during Reconstruction era, after the Civil War, and is really a look at how African Americans, Black people, Negroes, whatever you want to be called. You know, I have aunties from the generation that was called Negroes, and I'm called Black now. So, or African. I can't even keep track, and most folks from the past can't keep track of what our title is. Whatever you want to be called, that's what you are. Let's put it like that. These stories were really about how we looked at ourselves during that time. The first story is two pretty well-to-do African Americans, a couple that where the man is looking like, I need to be of a certain stature in society. I need to have a certain career to be looked at a certain way in society. And honestly, that hasn't changed for a lot of us. Today we feel that you need to have certain aspects you need to have a certain amount of money in your bank account to be considered, quote unquote, what is today. And I don't know how long this is going to age this story. What do they call them? A high value man, right? A high value woman, right? Being a carpenter doesn't make you a high value man, basically, is what he was saying. He needed to be a lawyer to be that. He needed to make a certain amount of money. He needed to be having a certain type of job, yada, 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 to be considered high value. Even back then, where his fiance, Mirama, is trying to tell him, one, you're not even that good at that, what you're doing. You don't even like it. You're only doing it really to have this status. And if you did what you were good at, one, your dad you wouldn't have lost your dad's business. You wouldn't have lost the home and everything like that. But since you did, I'm only going to marry you if you get this nonsense out of your head and do what you're good at, do what you're great at, and be that carpenter. My dad is one, and you're telling me that what my dad did for a living isn't dignified? Where his hard work has gotten us isn't dignified? That's the message I got from that story. And he finally relents and understands. And that's what, we want our woman to do, right, men? We want our woman to be a voice of reason for us. To my daughters and my nieces and my little cousins, females, be that voice of reason in that person's ear that you are with, And I say person because I don't know which way you're going to go in life. Be that voice of reason in their ear. And when they don't understand it, put your little foot down until they do, Because when they have that voice of reason, oh my God, they can do anything. And they will do the right thing. Because they know this is not something they want to lose. It's amazing. The second story, grandma getting the Christmas gift as the two little ones. I feel like maybe she was what they would call a spinster or an old hag, or in some realms she was just probably a lonely older woman that may never have had a family the way it came about in the story. And these two young children were her chance to raise a family that maybe she always wanted. And that's why she looked at them as her Christmas gift. And maybe that cop knew that about that woman and knew how kind-hearted and loving she was, and just knew that she needed somebody to pour that into, pour her overflow into, And although they are Christmas stories, they're life stories, because during that time, it was hard for us. And even now, it's still hard for us. But to know that you have somebody that has your back, somebody that's willing to help you up, somebody that's willing to help guide you, that's what you need in life, right? That's what we all need in life. These stories are awesome, and I'm pretty sure you got something from them that I did not, and I would love to hear about it. You know how to contact me, But I want to say Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone that is listening to this, and go see Chef. He has a wonderful recipe for you inspired by these stories. And until next time, as always, have a blessed day.
Welcome, my friends, to the Galley. I am your chef, and today we have a wonderful recipe inspired by the stories you've just heard. Today, we'll be creating brown sugar pineapple ham. Now, what do you need for this wonderfully tasty recipe? An 8-pound smoked half-bone in spiral cut ham. 1.5 cups pineapple juice, 3/4 cups packed light brown sugar, half cup apple cider vinegar, 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard, 1 teaspoon hot sauce, 1/4 teaspoon ground allspice, 1 20-ounce can pineapple slices drained, and of course some maraschino cherries. Now, how do we put this together? Easy. Adjust a rack to lower third of the oven and preheat to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Wrap the ham in aluminum foil, fat cap side up. Set ham on the rack in a large roasting pan and fill bottom of the pan with 1/4 water, about 4 cups depending on the size of the pan. Bake ham until the internal temperature reaches 120 degrees Fahrenheit, about 1 hour and 20 minutes. Meanwhile, make the glaze. In a small saucepan, bring pineapple juice, brown sugar, vinegar, mustard, hot sauce, and allspice to a boil. Reduce the heat to medium high and simmer, swirling occasionally until thick enough to coat a spoon. About 15 minutes. Remove from direct heat and set aside atop the stove to keep warm. Now, carefully remove the roasting pan with the ham from the oven. Increase the oven temperature to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Brush the ham all over with the glaze. Arrange the sliced pineapple all over the ham, securing each slice with a few toothpicks. Add the maraschino cherries to the center of each pineapple. Slice and secure with a toothpick. Brush top of ham, pineapple, and cherries with more glaze. Now, return the ham to oven uncovered to keep baking, basting with more glaze every 15 minutes until heated through about 45 more minutes. Remove from the oven and brush the remaining glaze and serve warm. And that is it, my friends. Now, go. Make this recipe yours. And until I have another wonderful recipe for you, remember this time of the year and what it really means. And until next time, my friends, as always, enjoy.
Thank you, my friends, for coming on this voyage. Thanks to Art by Chalet for the logo, episode, and shirt designs. You can get t-shirts and other items on tpublic.com. You can contact me on all socials at AfroTalesCast. That's AfroTalesCast. And email me at AfroTalesCast@gmail.com. You may also become a benefactor by simply sharing with any and everyone, giving a thumbs up, a 5-star rating and review in your podcast app of choice, or simply donating on Patreon or Ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com. So until we meet again, may your winds be fair and your seas follow.